Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever tier list video on the channel. I am Harry and I am not going to waste too much time explaining everything. I'll kind of explain the criteria as to what I picked for this tier list as I go along. Pretty simple. I've picked 30 horror movies, similar enough to how we do it on the channel. Everything's pre-1970. And I'll explain other stuff as I go along. But anything we've covered on the podcast, I'll kind of fly through. And anything we haven't talked about, I'll spend a little more time on. So I think I'm just going to get the Universal monster movies out of the way first. As you can see, I am going to just show you here. So we've Perfect is the top. Certified Classic. It's good. It's fine. It's not the best. And the worst. I've kind of also picked a pretty broad range of quality as well, so that not everything's a certified classic, you know. So as I said, we'll start with the Universal monster movies, and first of all we got Dracula. So let's start with Dracula anyway. As I said, we're not going to spend too much time on the ones we've covered on the podcast. As you all know, I've seen it a couple of times, and on my rewatch I preferred it. To call it a certified classic, I think for certified classic, like they are technically all classics, you know. But for certified classic, I'm looking for something that's near perfect. And I think calling Dracula near perfect is maybe a little generous. It's at very least, it's good. Which, if anything, should probably just be called it's very good. But it's a good film, is Dracula. I like it a lot. And then straight away, we'll go into Frankenstein, which, if I'm honest, I prefer and is definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, a certified classic in my eyes. Yes, it's a fantastic film. James Whale kills it. I really enjoyed that film. Again, on a rewatch, I think I preferred it. Prior to the episodes that we filmed for Universal Monster Month, I did prefer Bride of Frankenstein to Frankenstein, and now I don't really know. It's a lot trickier. So I'll be honest, I'm going to stick Bride of Frankenstein in there as well. I know I've just skipped The Invisible Man, but I'll do that now in just a second. And I can already tell that Certified Classic is still going to end up being quite full here. And The Invisible Man. Had you asked me a month ago, I would have said it was perfect. But I fully had forgotten how irritating Una O'Connor is in that film. She's bad enough in Bride of Frankenstein as well. But she is pretty much unwatchable in Invisible Man and gets an unfortunately a large amount of screen time because James Whale was such a fan of hers. I'm not such a fan of hers. I'm sure she was a lovely lady. Her humor, if you could call it that, is not particularly for me. And now let's kind of talk about some of the Universal monster movies that we haven't covered on the podcast. And we'll start with The Wolfman. And The Wolfman is, believe it or not, I'm going to stick in certified classic. Yes, you are probably all going, oh my god, he's actually put Wolfman ahead of Dracula or whatever, but I think Wolfman is so underrated. It is so great, and I adore that film. Lon Chaney Jr. is class. Claude Rains is Claude Rains. Y'all know I love him. Have you seen in the the Invisible Man episode where we just gushed about how great Claude Rains is for an hour? Wolfman's really good. Creature from the Black Lagoon, I really do like, and is definitely due a rewatch. But in the meantime, I am going to put it in. It's good. I'll put it ahead of Dracula. Probably don't pay too much attention to the order I have things in within the tiers, but hey, I may as well start off, and if it just kind of goes to pot, it goes to pot. But Creature from the Black Lagoon is a Jack Arnold film, and I like Jack Arnold's films. It's probably my favorite of his I've seen so far. The only one that's quite big that I haven't seen is The Incredible Shrinking Man. But I have another Jack Arnold film in here, which is Tarantula, and if I'm honest, it's fine. Tarantula's fine. I do think it's probably better than the majority of the B movies of the time. I prefer it to It Came From Outer Space. I prefer it to Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. It's a good B movie. Isn't necessarily the best horror movie ever, no. And as far as all of these classics, because there's so many classics here, it's fine. It's Tarantula. It's not going to set the world alight, but it's still a very good time. It's a very enjoyable film. I reckon we then just go a little bit back in time and we go through some of the earliest ones on here, like literally the oldest film here. Yeah, it's fine. Any film historians are probably holding a sniper rifle to me outside my house right now. But listen, Dante's Inferno visually is absolutely stunning, and you cannot take away the fact that it is one of the greatest achievements in the history of cinema. It is, for me, as most people would say, it is the first feature film. Like, what's that one that's like 3 hours long? Birth of a Nation. Haven't seen it. Birth of a Nation came out after this, and this is like 70 something minutes long. So I don't know how people can say The Birth of a Nation's the first feature film. I'm sure Birth of a Nation was well, I know Birth of a Nation was a much bigger success and was far more famous than Dante's Inferno, but Dante's Inferno is it's an essential, I think. But that being said, it's not necessarily easy to get through either. It's quite long. Pacing wise, it feels quite long. It's quite slow, but yeah, visually, it is like the visuals are so great. They're so ahead of their time. And yeah, I have a few here from the 20s as well. Some we have, some we haven't covered on the podcast. And we'll start with one that we have. We'll start with The Man Who Laughs, which neither myself or Shane were huge on. To put it in, it's not the best. Feels kind of harsh. But it's not the best, is it? Yeah, I'm sure you'll all hate me for that, and that's fine. I don't really care. But yeah, The Man Who Laughs is, besides the incredible performance from Conrad Veidt or wherever you're from, depends how you say it. But besides that performance, there's very little to this movie, except for the effects as well. But as we said, Jack Pierce, who did the effects, I mean, he's done Frankenstein, he's done Dracula, he's done Invisible Man. The man is a legend himself. But narratively, it's so much longer than it needs to be. It gets so bogged down. The pacing is pretty bad, if I'm honest. But yeah, Conrad Veidt's performance is sensational. He is class, but he's a class actor. And yeah, besides that, there's very little to this film that I particularly enjoyed. It's not the best, is it? Another one from the 20s. So yeah, I don't have any of the Christopher Lee Dracula films here because one, I haven't seen any of them, and two, if anyone is particularly big into the Christopher Lee films and wants to see us cover them, I would happily do a video where I watch them all for the first time and then rank them at the end. I'll do that if that's something people are interested in, but if it's not, then I'll leave it. But yeah, speaking of Dracula, we'll go for the OG Nosferatu. It's good. It's pretty essential silent horror, I think it's safe to say. It's it's due a rewatch, if I'm honest, and I'll probably be rewatching it early next year because obviously the remake is coming out, the Robert Eggers remake, which will be great. I'm assuming it's going to be great anyway. But yeah, Nosferatu's a very, very good classic silent horror. Again, to call it like near perfect, for me, I think is maybe a bit of a stretch these days. Obviously, for the time, it was a monster, pun intended, achievement in cinema. And obviously, I love German Expressionism. So just to prove that I do love German Expressionism, we have our first perfect film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. We've covered it on the podcast already. You all know that I am obsessed with this film. I love it so much. I've seen it a few times. Nicolas Cage's favorite film. It's fantastic. Now, potentially an underrated one, in my opinion, I'm going to put it in certified classic, is The Phantom of the Opera. And already I'm just saying to you now, just ignore the Order of the Tears. I'm not going to be doing that. But I think the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera is pretty underrated. I think that melodrama in silent films works. I think they are two things that kind of go hand in hand. And I get that people who don't necessarily like melodrama don't necessarily like The Phantom of the Opera, but hey, I quite like it. And I think the film is pretty great. I think the effects are pretty great. I think the ending, because like a lot of films back then, sort of pre-mid-30s, didn't really know how to end. A lot of films kind of just ended hella abrupt. And I feel like this is a really concise, well thought out ending. And I know it's like an adaptation of other stuff, but I just think it is really well done. I think they've executed it amazingly. And yeah, The Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney Sr., I thought was class in this film. I haven't seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It was a toss-up between The Hunchback of Notre Dame and another film for the 30th place in this film, but I went with the other one, and I'm kind of glad I did because it was on the bucket list for a long time. And hell, I'll just say it now: it's Plan 9 from Outer Space. Plan 9 from Outer Space is not the worst. It's not. It's good fun. I enjoy Plan 9 from Outer Space. Don't get me wrong. Technically, it is a disaster class in cinema. It's something you need to see for your own eyes. It's comparable to The Room, and as I would say, The Room is not the worst movie of all time, because for me, something that's made terribly but has charm or is endearing or is entertaining or is fascinating is better than something that is just boring. Plan 9 from Outer Space is anything but boring. There is a lot to unpack with that film. Ed Wood Jr., it is a masterpiece from Ed Wood Jr. I thoroughly enjoyed Plan 9 from Outer Space, despite it being, not the best. I've just realised that I actually skipped a Universal monster movie, and that kind of goes to show kind of everything I think about it, and that's The Mummy, which is going straight down there. Yes, you all are going to love that, I'm sure. The Mummy is a boring slog. I forgot it existed when I was doing the Universal monster movies, and that just goes to show how I feel about it. It's got a pretty good opening, it's safe to say that, and then from there the rest of the movie is, to say it goes to a crawl is harsh on films that go to a crawl. It is like more or less stagnant. There's very little, if anything, that happens then. Boris Karloff, they tried to make him the next man of 1,000 Faces after Lon Chaney died, and Boris Karloff is sensational. I love that guy. He's a fantastic actor in this sort of world. But I haven't seen any of his non-horror films, by the way, so if there's any non-horror Boris Karloff you'd recommend, please do let me know. But The Mummy, isn't it? It's one of my least favourite horror films I've probably seen, just because of how abhorrently boring it is. But because I already feel bad about everything I've just said about a Boris Karloff movie, let's talk about The Body Snatcher. And The Body Snatcher, it's good. Yeah, it's very good. I really like it. I think it's really underrated. Bela Lugosi's in it as well. And I think it's very underrated. I don't think enough people talk about The Body Snatcher. It's about this doctor's school in Edinburgh, and slowly but surely we kind of figure out that the main doctor in this school is a little dodgier than he lets on, and he's got this very dodgy friend played by Boris Karloff, and the young apprentice who is kind of his main, not client, patient at the moment, is this young girl who is struggling to walk, whilst he's kind of trying to juggle figuring this out for the first time because it's his first kind of proper patient. He's also trying to figure out what it is about these guys that just seems so dodgy. And yeah, the movie is called The Body Snatcher, so there's kind of a spoiler in the title. But yeah, it's very good, and I would definitely recommend it. Right, you all know that we love Hitchcock on the podcast, so let's talk about The Birds. Shane actually just talked about The Birds on the podcast on the Invisible Man episode, I do believe. And yeah, he said that he likes it more than me, and that's true. I'm not a big fan of The Birds at all, and you know that I do really like Hitchcock. But The Birds, it's not the best. And I hope someone takes this out of context and sees that I have The Birds behind Plan 9 from Outer Space. It's not behind Plan 9 from Outer Space. That's just kind of the order that I have them in at the minute. But that's kind of funny, so I'm going to leave it that way, and let's see what people say. But The Birds isn't great. I'm not a big fan of it. I think that there's so many better horror movies from around the same time, and I don't really understand why it's got the reputation it does. Like, there's genuinely at least 20 Hitchcock films I've seen, and I mean that, at least 20 Hitchcock films that I've seen that are better than it. And yet it has such a reputation of being such a famous movie. I know the reputation isn't necessarily great, but like, it's a very famous movie for the kind of quality that it is. Yeah, it's probably part of the reason why I'm not a big fan of it is because of how much more notoriety it has than some far better Hitchcock films. But yeah, let's talk about another Hitchcock film, and it's maybe my favorite movie ever made. Not sure, but it's certainly up there. I'm actually going to do a 2-for-1 here, because I'm going to put Psycho Imperfect, but I'm also going to put a movie that came out the exact same year, Imperfect, and that's Peeping Tom. Yeah, so we've talked about Psycho a few times in the podcast. I'm not going to talk about it. You all know that I love it. Peeping Tom, however, also came out in 1960 and is amazing. It is one of my favorite serial killer movies ever made. It is so eerie. It is so seedy, but like, it's not necessarily as visually seedy as other horror films would be. It's more just, it makes you uncomfortable, but in a really stylistic way. The lighting in this movie is beautiful. The performances are great. I know not everyone's a huge fan of the lead performance. I love it. I think the movie is literally perfect. I love it so much. Peeping Tom is so underrated, and yeah, it's a real unsettling thriller. I'm not necessarily sure if I'd like it. It is a serial killer movie, and I guess the slasher formula kind of didn't exist yet. But yeah, it is a horror film, but it does kind of play out more like a thriller. There is definitely certain films on this list that feel more like a thriller than a horror, and yeah, I think Peeping Tom is one of them. That being said, it's a perfect movie. I absolutely adore Peeping Tom. It is so underrated. It's great. Michael Pell, legend. And it's Fine's looking kind of bare, so I'm gonna just throw The Blob in there. Yeah, Steve McQueen, The Blob. It's fine. It's another B movie, but it's I don't know. I think I maybe prefer it to Tarantula, but I'm not sure. Steve McQueen is a good lead, and the panic that's going on is pretty mad. Yeah, I had a weird time watching this for the first time because I basically had like an hour and a half to kill organizing the dry store in work. This is going back a year or two, I'd say, and yeah, I just got it up on the laptop whilst I was organizing the place, and yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy it. It's a fun B movie, and I think it was actually my first Steve McQueen film, which is insane to think now. But yeah, The Blob is it's grand. I haven't seen the '70s one. If it's any good, do let me know because I'll check it out if you all recommend it. Next up, I'm gonna throw another one in. It's good, and I am picking Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, it's a huge film in its success and its depiction of zombies, and I think there's a film that came out prior that is better, which is here, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of zombie films. Shaun of the Dead is a masterpiece, don't get me wrong, but there's not many other horror films, or zombie films, I should say, that I'm a huge fan of, and I think Night of the Living Dead is one of the better ones, but the genre as a whole just feels very repetitive, and it's kind of hard to say that when Night of the Living Dead was one of the first to do it all, but yeah, they're coming to get you, Barbara will be like forever one of the most iconic line deliveries in horror, full stop. And the ending is incredibly memorable. And now that I am talking about it, I think it's due a rewatch. Yeah, it's probably due a rewatch. I haven't seen it in a couple of years now, so yeah, my shtick, Night of the Living Dead on soon because I have it in It's Good, which if anything is it's very good category, I should say. But yeah, I should probably watch that again because now that I'm talking about it, I'm kind of talking myself into liking it more. But let's talk about the better film anyway for me. And that's the OG, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is great crack. Very camp, very fun, very, very unsettling at the same time, though. It's, yeah, the mass hysteria subgenre, if you want to call it that, is, yeah, this is one of the better ones in it, I think. This is a fantastic film. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. It's from the 50s, and it's kind of it's not necessarily a B movie, but like it kind of plays out as one in a way, and it's probably the best of the lot in that sort of style of horror movie, I guess. It's fantastic. I thoroughly enjoy Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's hard not to talk about it without spoiling it. Basically, it's like a big conspiracy, and they're kind of zombies, but they're kind of not. There's these big plant things, and the effects are great. The ending's great, and just everybody, you just can't trust anybody. That's Invasion of the Body Snatchers in as a non-spoilery summary as I can give. Let's talk about Roger Corman's Bucket of Blood. And yeah, it's good. It's good. The lead performance is whack, and I love it. The concept itself is whack, and I love it. It's kind of funnier than I thought it would be. It's quite satirical, and I enjoyed it. And yeah, Bucket of Blood. People kind of say it doesn't get its flowers because it came out pre-Psycho, pre-Peeping Tom, and that. But I think Roger Corman does a fantastic job with the film, and yeah, the sculptures are pretty cool looking. I'll be honest, they're pretty iconic looking. Yeah, he has a gift, so he does, or does he? Freaks. Freaks is fine. It's fine. It's Freaks. Yeah, in the same way that I think James Whale is an absolute master of cinema, Todd Browning is, yeah, he's good. He did Dracula and he did Freaks, and I prefer Dracula for sure, but neither of them are particularly paced well in my opinion. Both of them have, I guess, pretty rushed endings, if I'm honest. And yeah, that being said, the ending of Freaks is actually probably better than the ending of Freaks is better than the ending of Dracula, but it also kind of feels like it takes a long time to get there. So yeah, Freaks is fine, and I don't know, calling it a horror movie. I suppose the last act is definitely horror, but the first two acts are not horror movies at all. And it's kind of interesting the way it plays out because the whole time you're sitting there and you're like, this isn't scary, this isn't horror at all, this is just a drama, if anything. But yeah, the last act does play out quite horrific, shall we say. And yeah, it's certainly a fun cast of characters. A lot of people in this film I'd never seen or heard of before, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, Freaks is it's an interesting film to say the least. But yeah, the first two acts is quite interesting how they just don't play out as a horror at all. They are more so a drama and a melodrama, if anything. Next, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. Manos: The Hands of Fate. Yeah, when I say Plan 9 from Outer Space is like so bad it's good. Manos: The Hands of Fate is just terrible. It's just a terrible movie. Like there's scenes where people like walk in one door, but then they're in the wrong room and stuff. It's pretty funny. Like it's almost incoherent. The sound design is horrendous. It is pretty bad, and I would definitely recommend it. But just so you can see just how bad movies get. But I don't think it necessarily has the charm that Plan 9 from Outer Space has, in my personal opinion. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is fine. Ooh, is that kind of harsh? Should it be in the one above? I don't know. Hmm. I may have to address that later. It's definitely a good movie. Hmm. I'm looking at it and I'm like, is it harsh? Yeah, do you know what? It is. It is harsh. I'm gonna stick it up one. I think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's a good time, actually. I haven't seen it since last year. Last October I watched it, and yeah, I did enjoy it for sure. Well, hello everyone. I'm back from work, and yeah, I kind of got interrupted there, I'm afraid. And I've realized three things in work. One, I forgot to include A Place of Madness somehow. I've seen that film. It's very, very good. Don't know how I forgot to include it in this. And two, I've been quite harsh on one film, and three, I've been quite generous to one film. And I'm actually just going to make a straight swap. The Birds is going to go into It's Fine, and Freaks is going to go into It's Not the Best. Because the more I thought about it, I realized, The Birds, yeah, I am due a rewatch, and it is fine. It's fine. I don't love it, but it's fine. And as far as Freaks goes, I actually don't like about 60% of the film anyway, so yeah, to put it in It's Fine, I think is kind of generous. Anyway, on to the last five. And yeah, we've Cat People. It's good. Cat People's good. It's not quite what I was expecting. And it's got one of the OG jump scares, like literally ever, which is pretty cool. I quite like it. I know this film has a real strong cult following. I wouldn't go that far now, but I definitely would recommend Cat People. It's worth a go. And yeah, I don't have an awful lot to say about Cat People. It was a while ago since I last watched it, and I just remember, yeah, it's very good. Don't get me wrong, but it's certainly not my favorite film of the 50s or my favorite horror of the 50s. Don't get it twisted. However, one that I do really like is Eyes Without a Face. That is a straight banger. That is an incredible film. And if I'm honest, I have it in certified classic. I don't know if it will go to perfect, but like I really did like it, and I haven't seen it in a while. It's really dark. It's really eerie. It's got a great atmosphere about it. It's got a great ending. The effects are pretty cool, but the mask, just how expressionless it is, causes her to give a really emotional performance with just her eyes. It's funny in like horror. There's often situations like that where characters or actors are forced to kind of go more into a different style of acting than maybe they're used to. With her, she definitely had a lot of body language acting, and definitely her eyes were very evocative and emotional because, yeah, she didn't exactly have a particularly easy life. And yeah, no, there's so many scenes in this film that are amazing. Eyes Without a Face. It's a French classic of horror, a certified classic, if you will. And Oni Baba, yeah, I just realized certified classic is still going to become a little bit heavy. Let's just say that Oni Baba's amazing. Funnily enough, similar-ish to Freaks, it doesn't play out as much of a horror as I was expecting until the final act. The final act is straight horror, and the first two are more of a drama. However, Oni Baba does it way better. The horror is way better. The direction's beautiful. Even just the shots of like the fields and stuff are so atmospheric and amazing. The performances are all great. It is also quite melodramatic, but there's something about Oni Baba tonally. It's funny to compare it to Freaks, but yeah, they are, I guess, somewhat similar in their structure. But Oni Baba, it's not even close which one I think is better. Oni Baba is a certified classic. It's a phenomenal film, a classic of Japanese horror. And yeah, I haven't seen Kwaidan. I know that's another Japanese horror film that a lot of people recommend. And Oni Baba's the only film from that director I've seen as well. I know he's a few horror films. There's the one about the samurais, the ghosts. Kuroneko. Yeah, that's one that's definitely on my watch list from the same director. Yeah, I think Oni Baba's amazing. I'm not entirely certain why my camera's not focusing now. It's an interesting one. Anyway, I've only 2 to go, and if I'm honest, I'm going to throw both of them in certified classic. The Haunting and Rosemary's Baby. They're the two most recent ones that I've watched. And yeah, The Haunting is fantastic. I really liked it. I think it's very underrated. Atmospherically, it's amazing. The way it makes the house a character is one of the best examples of a film making its location a character that I've probably ever seen in horror. Like, the house genuinely feels alive, and yeah, there is literally like that one scene where the door almost looks like it's breathing, but the way that this is shot and the way the performances are amazing. It's a fantastic film, and I actually haven't seen The Haunting of Hill House, but supposedly it's also very, very, very good, and The Haunting is, based on the same characters as The Haunting of Hill House. So if you enjoyed that series, I would definitely recommend The Haunting. And then as for Rosemary's Baby, funnily enough, I just watched The Omen, which has nothing to do with this, but The Omen and Rosemary's Baby is a double feature, is a wild double feature to do. But yeah, Rosemary's Baby is... It didn't feel horror to begin with, but it certainly did at the end. Obviously, there's that scene, and it's shot so interestingly. It's funny, obviously, Polanski, the way he manages to make a film about essentially a woman who is being... how do you talk about Rosemary's Baby without spoiling it? Basically, in fairness, the husband does come across a bit dickish to begin with, but the way their relationship goes and the way their relationship with their neighbors goes is so fascinating, and it's so eerie. And the ending, it's very 60s, don't get me wrong, but I just thought the ending was spectacular. It's one that's very hard to talk about without spoiling it, Rosemary's Baby. But yeah, Mia Farrow is incredible in that film. So is Cassavetes, in fairness. He's not a much smaller role, but he certainly doesn't have as much screen time as Mia Farrow. She is class in the film. But yeah, I think Rosemary's Baby is definitely a hard one to talk about without spoiling it. But for me, phenomenal. It is about as eerie and as seedy and it's just a very emotionally manipulative film, shall we say, without spoiling anything. And yes, that is my classic horror tier list. If I've left any of your favorites out, do let me know. It might be because I haven't seen them, or it's because I don't think it's very good, controversial, or it's because it's a place of madness and I don't know how I left it out. I'm so sorry. I genuinely like that film and everything. I don't know how I left A Place of Madness out. Anyway, yeah, something different, and we'll probably get the structure to these videos a little better over time. This is obviously the first time either of us, myself or Shane, have done one of these. So yeah, let me know what I can do better. But yeah, that's the list. Let me know what I got wrong, and let me know what I got right. Let me know if anyone in the comments agrees with me. Thank you so much for watching. The support has been amazing as of late. And yeah, so this week is Bride of Frankenstein, or this week coming, shall I say. And yeah, I'm thoroughly looking forward. Thank you so much, and I'll see you then.